Hello and welcome to Melee's Turnwheel, the series that takes a retroactive look at the Fire Emblem series chapter by chapter. I'm your host, I'm Melee Kirby, and today we're taking it back to chapters 11 Eliwood, 11 Hector, 12, 13, and 13X of Fire Emblem, the Blazing Blade. Starting FE7 proper today, FE7, Eliwood, and Hector mode, the main modes of the game, and I'm excited. It has been a little while since the last main episode. I attempted to record this episode a few weeks back, but I just I wasn't really that into it. I think I just kind of caught myself on a bad day, and so after I recorded, I think it was like the first couple chapters I recorded, and I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna keep that, just because I wasn't bringing it in the same way that I like to. So this is take 2 on recording this episode. Hopefully this one goes a little bit better. But yeah, so today we're going to be talking about the first few chapters of Eliwood and Hector mode. In case you are, it's been a little while again since the last episode, so in case you forgot, I am going to be playing both Eliwood and Hector mode. Most of the time, I'm only going to be talking about the chapter, I might be mentioning small differences here and there between the chapters. Especially, if there's a difference, because Eliwood mode takes place from Eliwood's POV, Hector mode takes place from Hector's POV. So even though they go through mostly the same events, sometimes the story can change a little bit depending on what mode you're playing. You get different cutscenes and things like that. For the beginning of the game, and I think most of the beginning and middle of the game, there's not really any interesting changes to make note of. It's pretty much just like Hector says a thing. It's slightly different than what Eliwood says, but it's basically the same. So don't expect me to go into a lot of detail into the differences here, but later down the line there will certainly be chapters where that distinction becomes more significant. But before we get into any of that, though, I have to go ahead and talk about the last question of the episode, which was, if I'm not mistaken, what is your least favorite game mechanic in the series? And I got some answers from that. Let me just take a look real quick. At Super User Person says, if we're talking one map mechanics, those stupid disappearing tiles in the water maps in FE6 and 7. I very much hate those as well. He's referring to chapter 14X of FE6, and then Night of Farewells. I don't remember what number that is. I think it's 28X or something like that. Of this game, where they have tiles that disappear and then reappear, and if you're in the wrong spot at the wrong time, you can basically just completely get stuck, and I don't know. It's a cool concept. I do kind of like some of that idea in regards to making your flyers have to do more work and stuff like that, but in practice it just doesn't pan out well, I don't think. At Knight of the Rake says, same turn reinforcements are the obvious choice, with 3 houses maddening as particularly egregious examples. But I also think rain and snow in GBAFE are pretty bad. So, yeah, same turn reinforcements is kind of a good go-to. Same with Fog of War. I think, those are in most games, and most people do not like them in those games. So, it's a go-to for a reason, though, right? The problems with them are so obvious, on their face. So last time I answered when I proposed this question, I kind of answered it as if FE6 or FE7 rain and snow was my least favorite game mechanic, and at the time I did think that was true. However, I have since remembered. I completely forgot about in Thracia 776. I complained at length about how your staves can miss in that game. Your healing staves can miss. Your staves can miss in most games, like status staves and things like that. But in Thracia, your healing staves can miss. And I have gone on record saying that is probably my least favorite mechanic in the series, and I still do think it's true. I completely forgot about that when I talked about this question last time, but yeah, no, that's still the case. Man, I fucking hate that so much. Okay, so for this episode's question, here's what I got for you guys. So in this episode, we are going to meet a guy by the name of Merlinus. You remember Merlinus from FE6. He is going to reappear in this game, or in this in this episode of this game, and he works a little bit differently than he does in FE6. Yeah. So that begs the question, right? Like, many games have different inventory systems, right? Like FE1 had a unique inventory system. FE2 kind of has like the unique thing where you can have the convoy like take inventory items and like transfer them to the other place. Many games have like unique systems of handling their convoy. And then some games just have very basic, like, you know, the Lord has access to the convoy and everybody near the Lord has access to the convoy. So I'm curious what is your favorite convoy system in the series? And why? You know, like is it this game with the way it balances sort of risk versus reward with bringing Merlinus? I'll explain the mechanics of how Merlinus works when we get to him. Even though they're not technically going to be relevant until next episode, I'll still mention them here. I'll probably bring them up again next episode, though. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started with our chapters for the episode, starting with Chapter 11, Eliwood, which is not taking leave. Is it taking leave? Hold on. It is taking leave. Taking leave. So we quickly find out that Eliwood and Hector mode take place 1 year after the events of Lyn mode. What's interesting to me here is that rather than at the beginning of the game, like in most games, we don't get the kind of breakdown of all the different territories and stuff like that until this chapter, until the beginning of FE, you know, like Eliwood and Hector mode, which I guess is just more evidence that there is, you know, this Lyn mode was kind of tacked on. You know, like the game doesn't properly start until you hit Eliwood and Hector mode, and I think the game is aware of that. So it saves like the big major explanation of Eliwood and kind of its various countries until now. Pretty much everything is the same as you remember from FE6. I will say it's a little bit weirder to see it here just because most of these countries do not matter. In FE6, you went to pretty much all of them. In a single playthrough, you could only go to, I think, all of them except one. But like you know, with the Ilia-Sakai route split, you could go to both theoretically. And then, of course, you know, you got to see the Western Isles and Bern and Lycia and Nabata and Etruria. So you got to see all these places. This game I'm pretty sure it only takes place across Bern and Lycia. There's no other countries that you participate in. That's not true. Nabata, you do go to Nabata. For like one, I think literally just one chapter. So less relevant here than it is in FE6, but it's good to know. And I mean, obviously, it would be weird for them to not include it, you know, because they already established these countries in FE6, so you might as well just throw in a little bit of an explanation. It does add some, like, later on, the stakes of, like, Etruria becoming involved in the conflict kind of do matter a little bit. So Etruria, I can understand why they would want to flag it up here, but like Ilia-Sakai and oh no Sakai, yeah, Sakai, like half of Lyn mode takes place in Sakai too. I did forget about that. So there are various reasons, and you know, certain characters are from do we get any characters that are from the Western Isles in this? I actually don't think so. But you know, there are some characters from Ilia, so there's reasons to bring them up here. It just they're not going to be relevant to the story, so I guess it seems a little redundant here, but you know, whatever, it doesn't really matter. I did think it was funny though, because there's a you know, it's just like a simple typo, but they misgender Hanan. Hanan is the Sakayan. What the fuck are they called? Not the Crusaders, but basically the Crusaders, right? Like in the first scouring, right? Like you had all these heroes the legendary heroes, I think that's what they were just called. And they all fought using their legendary weapons. And Hanan was the one who fought with Merlinus, and she settled down in Sakai. And I'm pretty sure she's very consistently been referred to as a woman, you know. But they misgender her here. And I think that was just interesting. I'm wondering if it's a typo or if they just like literally didn't know what gender Hanan was supposed to be, because they do seemingly, like, the writers, either the writers or I guess the localizers more likely just did not know shit about FE6. so that's the impression that I get sometimes, but that'll probably come up another time. They don't mention Brahmamantir at all. They might have at like the very beginning, but like, Bramman did not settle down. He did not, or they did not form any kind of country, or it, I guess, if you want to go there. Bramman did not form any country of their own. So they're conspicuously absent from this lineup, which I think is cool. I did mention in FE6 that the payoff to Bramamond is one of the few things that I think this game really does justice by FE6 with. It's really cool. It's a really cool payoff to a concept set up in FE6 that I really appreciate it. I think it's a cool concept, but we're getting way ahead of ourselves. That's not until much later. So the main conflict here is that Eliwood's father Elbert has gone missing, and a whole month has passed since Elbert has gone missing, and no one has heard any word from him. I guess like a whole retinue of knights has also gone missing, like they were with him and they went missing at the same time. So, no one's really sure what's going on. Eliwood is worried about his father, so he is going to go out and see if he can investigate and figure out what the deal is. All I have written down here is Eliwood's mom, which I'm pretty sure I just wanted to bring up because, like how many, a lot of Fire Emblem protagonists' parents are just both dead, right from the start of the game. So to know that Eliwood has not only a living father, but a living mother, and we see her is pretty cool. And also she's hot, so I just wanted to mention that. And then Eliwood's getting ready to head out. His mom comes to wish him farewell. He's taking a couple of guys on his mission. He has Marcus, who we recognize from FE6. He also is taking a guy named Lowen. And actually, at the beginning, that's it. It's just going to be Eliwood, Marcus, and Lowen. Marcus says, it would make me more comfortable if we could take like more knights. Or someone says that. I don't know if it's Marcus, but somebody says, I wish you could take more knights. But Eliwood says no, because he wants the majority of knights to stay back just to make sure that his mom is safe. I can, that makes sense. It's very in character for Eliwood. I do question, like, your mom's probably going to be fine. But, it's knowing what we know from later on in the game, maybe this was the right call. I'm not 100% sure. As they are getting ready to head out from the local area, a bandit attack happens. And this bandit attack, they're targeting a local village, and Eliwood decides that he's going to step in and stop them. He gets a couple new recruits as a result of this. There is a girl from the local village named Rebecca, and she decides that she wants to help fight off the bandits with Eliwood. And then, if you chose to start with Lyn mode, or if you selected the option to at the beginning of Eliwood or Hector mode, or I guess just Eliwood mode, this map is Eliwood exclusive. You get Mark back. Mark is hanging out at in this village. He just happened to be there. And when he sees the bandits attacking, he also comes along with Rebecca and says, hey, well, he doesn't say anything, but he kind of Dora the Explorer, look at the camera like, oh, hey, Mark, you want to fight with us too? Okay, sounds good. And that's how the map begins. You're controlling, what we got? So we got Eliwood, Marcus, Lowen, and Rebecca. We'll go through all of them. And then we also get a couple characters like right at the start. I think it's like after one turn, but we'll get to those guys in a second. So we'll start with Eliwood. Eliwood is the main protagonist of Eliwood mode. He is one of the three protagonists of the game more broadly. In Eliwood mode, he is force deployed on every chapter, whereas in Hector mode, he is the main lord is always forced in all of their maps. Whether that's Eliwood or Hector, depending on the mode you're playing. However, in certain maps, all three of them are forced, Lyn, Eliwood, and Hector. And no matter how, whether they're force deployed or not, if you lose them, if they die, then it's an automatic game over. So, take that as you will. Might be worth not bringing, if you're playing Hector mode, it might be worth not bringing Eliwood for some maps. Depends on kind of what you need, I guess. Eliwood is absolutely the Fire Emblem lord of all time. He is footlocked, he is swordlocked. He kind of has like a balanced stat spread, like he's kind of like Lyn, except not quite as weak, not quite as frail, but also not as fast. So he's not very good. I'm just gonna be straight up. He does eventually promote onto a horse, And not only does he promote onto a horse, he promotes onto a horse that can use lances. He basically becomes like an FE8 paladin in this game, which is pretty cool. However, his promotion is so late. This is one of the most notorious late promotions in the entire series. Not quite as notorious as FE6, I don't think, but this one gives it a run for its money. So all of the lords have special promotion mechanics. Basically, you need to get an item called a Heaven Seal, and you do get enough of them for all the lords. However, all of them are like basically you get them over the course of the story, and you cannot use your Heaven Seal. The first Heaven Seal you get, you cannot use it on your main lord. So if you are playing Eliwood mode, you cannot promote Eliwood with either the first or second Heaven Seal. You need to wait until you get your third Heaven Seal, and that is very late. That is very, very, very late. That is, I think at that point you only have like 3 or 4 chapters left in the entire game. Again, not quite as bad as Roy, where theoretically you could only have 1 chapter left in the entire game. But yeah, so promoting Eliwood in Eliwood mode is very, very, very late game. So you're not going to be able to make good use of that horse or that lance usage until very late. In Hector mode, when you can actually promote Eliwood with the first Heaven Seal, and most people, I would say, play Hector mode, especially on subsequent playthroughs, he can be alright. Like if you give him some levels, he doesn't need a lot. You just get him up to level 10, and then promote him as soon as you're able to, which is still pretty late into the game. Don't get me wrong. I think that's like I want to say it's like chapter 25 or 6, something like that. It's Unfulfilled Heart. I don't remember what number chapter that is, but it's very late. But it's still better than the other ones. So if you promote him as soon as you can, he becomes halfway decent, I guess. Up until that point, though, not a great showing from Mr. Eliwood here. I am playing on the ×3 effectiveness patch, meaning that his rapier, because he's the one who uses the rapier in this game, his rapier does actually do pretty substantial damage to cavaliers, and it actually works. Horse effective weaponry works on nomads and troubadours in this game, so you can actually do pretty solid damage to cavaliers and nomads, which is going to be pretty relevant for the next few maps. So he's not completely useless. He does have his benefits. However, he's not one of the weakest lords in the series. I definitely think he's like a step up from both Lyn and Roy. In terms of uselessness, but he's not very good. I'll just say that much. All right, next up, Marcus. So Marcus is our first example, I think, of a returning character from FE6. I guess, and chronologically, they return in FE6. But, Marcus was a playable character in FE6. He was the Jagan in that game, as well as he is in this game. And he's very good. FE6 Marcus was already pretty good. He was basically, a requirement to make hard mode function. But even in normal mode, right? Like, he was the only one that was consistently killing enemies really easily. And using him was the right call in a lot of situations. However, he did have one drawback, which is that he was one of the few Jagans that does genuinely fall off as you get further into the game. Not necessarily in normal mode. You can probably make him work in normal mode, but in hard mode, he does fall off pretty substantially because his growth rates are really bad, even by that game's standards, and that game does not have fantastic growth rates. So the deal with Jagans, I feel like I re-explain the concept of Jagans every time we start a new game, which I think is fair because some people might just skip straight over the other games and just come straight to FE7. But, for the most part, I'm assuming you guys are watching or listening to me talk about Jagans a bunch. So I'm just going to cut to the chase with this one. Jagans are really strong units who you get at the beginning of the game, and supposedly they get weaker as the game goes on, and you stop using them and use your better units instead, your growth units, who get stronger as the game goes on rather than weaker. And here's the thing about that, is that most Jagans don't actually fall off. Through various circumstances, you can usually make Jagans viable through the mid or even the late game. And FE6 Marcus was a rare example of that not being the case. However, FE7 Marcus is very much, fits into that category. His growth rates are not phenomenal. By the standards of the rest of the game, they are pretty mediocre. However, the average growth rates in this game are much, much, much higher. And so, FE7 Marcus has equivalent growth rates to, average characters in FE6. You can think of it like that. So he does pretty well for himself, especially on, on the easier difficulties. There's basically no possibility whatsoever of him struggling into the mid game, and with like a little bit of support, he can get to the late game pretty easily. In Hector hard mode, he does require a little bit more, a little bit more help to keep up, but it's not much in the way of investment. And he's so good. He's so mobile. The paladin class is so broken. He's a great character, and he's easily, in my opinion, the best character in this game from the gameplay perspective. The only possible contender for that title, other than him, is like Lin mode trained Florina. But I honestly don't even think that that's true. I think that he is pretty handily the best character in the game from the gameplay perspective of things. I do think it's cool that this Marcus is like our first example of a really traditional Jagan, right? Because we started with 4, and then FE4, 5, and 6 all had Jagans that were a little bit different from the norm. FE4 had Oifi, who was a paladin who was good, but he was not really even a contender for the best unit in that game. Like Ares and Seliph, both kind of like, they're both pretty substantially stronger than him, even early on, because it doesn't take very long to get Seliph promoted. So he was among the best units in that game, but certainly not the best of the best, basically. FE5 had kind of 2 Jagans, which was, kind of a distinctive feature by itself. But Avel and Dagdar were the Jagans in that game. Neither of them were paladins, so they were a bit unique in that regard. And then FE6 was Marcus was the best unit in the game at the beginning, and a paladin. However, unlike most Jagans, he did actually fall off. So and going forward, we're going to see more of these styles of Jagans where they are paladins. They are the strongest units at the start of their game, and they continue to be useful through the mid and the late game. And it's just funny to me that it took 4 games for us to get here. I don't know. Thought it was interesting. Lowen is a Cavalier, and he is okay. Cavaliers in this game are really good. Getting high mobility is always great, and upon promotion, getting access to the full weapon triangle is always nice. Lowen's stats leave a little bit to be desired. He leans towards bulk and a little bit of strength, but tends to be very slow. And the strength is not usually fantastic. However, just by merit of being a paladin, he's going to be pretty useful. He's going to be putting in work. So definitely worth using. If you are just skipping straight to Eliwood or Hector mode without doing Lin mode, he is absolutely going to be your best Cavalier, particularly in Hector hard mode, where there's not really a whole lot of room to train Sent, particularly in Hector hard mode, where there's not a whole lot of room to train Kent or Sane. Using Lowen in these first few chapters is really the only opportunity you're going to have to, train up a good paladin, other than, Marcus and eventually Isidora. So Lowen's useful. I definitely he's not like the best paladin in the game. In fact, he might be the worst one. But the worst paladin is still a pretty good unit as far as this game goes, at least. Rebecca is an archer, and once again, same as with Jagans, I don't really want to explain the concept of enemy phase focused games versus player phase focused games at the beginning of every single game we do. So just suffice it to say, in fact, actually, I did talk about this with Will probably a little bit already. This game is very enemy phase focused, meaning that archers are terrible. In fact, I would say that this game might be the worst that archers ever get, except for maybe FE8. Both of those games are so player phase or so enemy phase focused that having someone that can just, like, if you deploy them and put them in front of enemies, they just cannot kill things on enemy phase for the most part. It's not, it's awful. She's a terrible unit. Putting aside the fact that her stats are garbage. Even if she had good stats, she wouldn't be good. But she also has bad stats. So yeah, it's kind of a perfect storm of things in this game to make both Rebecca and Will very bad. But Rebecca in particular, I would say, is like maybe the worst unit. I mean, honestly, she might be the worst unit in the game. She's bottom 3 for sure. There are some other contenders for that title, but mostly ones that joined very, very late and just don't have a lot of opportunity to be useful. Rebecca has the whole game to be useful and still can't pull it off. So, take that as you will. Okay. And very shortly after you start the map, you get two more characters, one of which we already have met before. Actually, both of them we've met before. It's funny because I made that exact same... That wasn't a bit. I just accidentally, literally misspoke. But what's funny about that is when I recorded this episode for the first time, I did the exact same thing. So starting off, we have Dorcas. Dorcas we met back in Lin mode, and I've already kind of given my spiel on him. He's okay. He's certainly not the worst unit in the game, and you can make him work relatively easily. But he's not very useful. The other character that we see, the other one that we've met before, is Bartray. He is a returning character from FE6. You might, honestly, even if you played FE6, you might not have gotten Bartray because he was exclusive to B route on the Western Isles, whereas I know a lot of people like to go A route. But if you chose to go to B route, you'll recognize Bartray, and he's quite funny in that game, and he's halfway decent too. He's not a great unit in that game, but he's certainly serviceable. In this game, unfortunately, he's pretty bad. I would say he is definitely the worst of the two between Dorcas and Bartray. Some people disagree with that. I think that those people overestimate his ability to catch up in terms of speed, because he has a better speed growth than Dorcas by a pretty substantial amount. I'll be honest. Dorcas' speed growth is terrible, but his speed base is significantly higher. So it takes a fair few levels for Bartray to significantly outpace Dorcas in terms of speed. Yeah, you know the whole drill. Unit by unit comparisons aren't always super helpful, but I think most people are gonna, if they want to use a fighter, they're probably not going to use both. So if you want to pick one or the other, I would definitely say go Dorcas. Bartray, I mean, just like Dorcas, he's not the worst. But it's just not really worth using him unless you like him as a character, which maybe you do. If you're a fan of him from FE6 like I am, you might use him. I'm not using him, but you might want to. Actually, am I using him? Hold on, I might be. I am. Yeah, no, I plan to use him on my Eliwood mode playthrough, which is Eliwood normal mode, so it's gonna be piss easy anyway. It does not matter. Super doesn't matter. I did make a little bit of a change. Last episode, I said that I would be going to Linus map, Linus Four-Fanged Offense in Eliwood mode, and I said that I would be going to, I said I'd be going to Linus Four-Fanged Offense in Hector mode, and I said Lloyd for Eliwood mode. I changed my mind. I realized that was a terrible idea. I had reasons why I wanted to do it that original way. I'm not going to get into them because it would take too long to explain. But I eventually realized that those reasons were dumb, and I should not do that. I should make my life easier and go to Lloyd in Hector mode, and then Linus map in Eliwood mode where it's easier to get levels on the lords. Okay, yeah. So those are all the characters we get. Honestly, that's really all there is to say about this map in general. It's a very, very basic, simple map. You just kind of circle around. There's a shop here. There's some terrain that you can take advantage of. It's not really that complicated. In fact, it's extraordinarily simple. And you kill all the bandits. You recapture the village, and that's where the story picks back up. Eliwood asks Mark if he wants to come with him. Or what he plans to do from here on out, I guess. And he says, you should come with us if you don't have anything else to do, because we're looking for my father and we could really use your help. And Mark says yes. So Mark is going to be traveling with the others from here on out. Every chapter in the game, or at least most chapters in the game, have so almost every chapter in the game has a unique conversation between one unit and Mark if you deploy that unit on the map. So just as an example, in the next chapter, Birds of a Feather, in Eliwood mode only, we have a conversation between Dorcas and Mark where Dorcas says, "Here we go again, eh, Mark? Just like old times. Seems our fates are bound. Natalie? Oh, she's still in Fairey. I'm working for you this time, so she's not too worried. Guide my axe, Mark." And most of them are pretty simple like that. I do plan on bringing it up anytime the conversation is interesting, basically. And I plan to deploy every character and see every say every quote if I can. I might forget at some point, but it doesn't matter. I have the whole list in front of me anyway, so. Eliwood gets a lead here on where to go next. The village magistrate of the village he just rescued says that, my brother lives down in Laos, and he says it's terrible over there, something like that. I guess Laos is getting ready for... It seems like they're preparing for war. And Eliwood realizes that if they're preparing for war, that can mean nothing good. Because who would they be going to war against that the rest of Lycia doesn't know about? So he decides that he is going to go investigate Laos and see if that leads him anywhere. Rebecca decides that she's going to come along. There's a little bit of a conversation here where she says to her dad, like, hey, I want to go with Eliwood. And he says yes. It's interesting. I only bring it up here because we're seeing something that we don't see much going forward. Or, sorry, we do see more of it going forward. Previously, before now, we don't really see a lot of it, which is that there is a concerted effort to make it obvious, like, why, or maybe not obvious, but like talk about why each character has decided to accompany Eliwood long term. You look at a game like FE5 and someone joins like, hey, I'm going to help you fight off the bandits in this village. It's like, okay, great. And then they're just there now. They're just with you for the entire rest of the game. And there's some simplistic charm in that, right? Like it's funny to imagine why Ronan might decide that he wants to come with you and fight the Loptier cult with you, right? Like there's some imagination you can put into that. However, I do think it's cool that they have decided to start giving the more bit player characters motivations and reasons why they would want to accompany you beyond just like their initial, we have the same goal right in this moment, so I'm going to help you for a little bit. They did it a bunch in Lin mode, and they're doing it here now as well, which I think is nice. There's a name drop for Rebecca's brother here. Rebecca's brother is a playable character in this game. In a matter of speaking, you guys... Actually, I talked about this in the Will SSS episode, so, if you've listened to that, then you know what I'm talking about. But if you haven't, then stay tuned, because I'll explain all that another time. All right, and that's the end of the first chapter. He's going to Laos, on the way to Laos. I don't know if they mention it here or at the beginning of next chapter, but directly on the way to Laos is this place called Santaruz, and he plans to just stop by there real quick too, just to see if there's anything he can get from there as well. It's on the way, so he figures why not. So next up we have Chapter 11 Hector mode, which is called Another Journey. This one takes place from the POV of Hector, who is one of Eliwood's best friends, or Eliwood's best friend full stop, I guess. Hector starts off by being mad at Uther. Uther is his older brother, and he basically yells at Uther for, we're friends with Eliwood, or I'm friends with Eliwood, and you have like a respectful professional relationship with Eliwood and Elbert. Why are you not helping them? Why are we not helping him look for his father? And Uther basically says, I can't afford to do that right now. Like, we have Burn breathing down our necks, ready to pounce on us at the first sign of weakness. I need to make sure all my affairs are in order here to help protect Lycia. And Hector basically says, fuck you, and gets mad at him. Matthew shows up. Matthew is a character, again, we saw from Lin mode. He is an Ostian spy. We're just kind of like learning this now. Previously, he was a thief, or he said he was a thief, and there were like bits and pieces of like, okay, there's definitely more going on here than he's letting on. He knew Sarah for some reason. If there's unique dialogue with him, and at that point we don't know who Hector is, but he's a unique portrait guy. In chapter 7, I think. So there was clearly more going on here than we were being led to believe. But now we just find out straight up that he is an Ostian spy. So he's friends with Hector. Hector is basically getting ready to just leave. Like, he says, okay, well, if Uther isn't going to do anything to help, I'm just going to go help Eliwood myself. So he's getting ready to pack his bags. Matthew wants to go with him, but Hector says no. And so, yeah, that's pretty much the end of that conversation. On his way out, he gets attacked by assassins. So I don't know where to begin with this one. So, I mean, yeah, I'll say the plain facts of what happens, and then we'll talk a little bit about this later. But he gets attacked by assassins. Some guys break into the castle, and go to attack him. Matthew shows back up. He never actually left, to be quite honest. And he and Hector fight off the assassins. This is an alright map. I like that it gives you options on like where to go and how to engage the enemy. On Hector hard mode, it can be a little obnoxious. It can be very luck dependent at times. I had to retry this map quite a few times just to get like the correct rolls that I needed. There's also a side objective here, which is unheard of for an early chapter in a Fire Emblem game, having like decent side objectives. No, I guess that's not true. But there's a chest basically, and the chest has a red gem in it. In Eliwood mode, you have like a good amount of starting money. In Hector mode, you have nothing. So if you don't get this red gem, you will have $0. You'll be broke as shit going into the next few maps where you might want to buy items and things like that. So definitely try to get this chest. There is another thief on their way to it, and you have to be like kind of fast in order to get it. But you can. Now, what's funny about a funny little quirk of this map, I guess, is that if you manage to get Matthew to the other thief, they have a speed tie. It's this guy's speed will always be. I don't know if there's any stat variance on it, but I'm pretty sure it will always be equal to Matthew's base speed. And in this game, in order to steal something from somebody, your speed needs to be equal to or higher than theirs. So what this means is that you and the thief can just steal shit from each other back and forth. You can just steal their if they get the red gem, you can steal the red gem back, or you can steal a vulnerary. And every time you steal, you get 10 experience. So you just keep doing this over and over and over again until eventually Matthew will probably just level up speed. At which point, there's you can't do that anymore. Now you can steal from him, but he can't steal from you, so he's just gonna attack you. But yeah, I always enjoy doing that in this map. It's a funny little gag. But yeah, I always enjoy doing that in this map. It's a funny. I don't know what the right word is. It's a funny little mechanic quirk that I like to capitalize on. All right, so only one new character to talk about in this chapter, Hector. Hector is the main protagonist of Hector mode, and so a lot of what I said to Eliwood, especially in regards to promotion, applies to Hector as well. He can promote only very late into the game if you are playing Hector mode. He only gets a few chapters to be promoted. This, however, is not as big. I mean, it still sucks, don't get me wrong. But he does not benefit from his promotion in the same way that Eliwood does. Unshackling his stats is nice. And there are reasons why you might want to promote Hector like as soon as possible. But you're not losing out on a horse and a much better weapon type. In fact, you don't gain any movement upon promotion, and you get swords as a secondary weapon type, which are inferior to axes anyway. He uses axes, by the way. His stat spread is he's kind of like an armor knight. In fact, I think his promoted class is actually just an armor knight. In terms of like it takes damage from armor slayers and things like that. I'm not sure about that though. But anyway, he is very bulky, very strong, but slow, and has bad res typically. So, yeah. So keep that in mind. He's a pretty good unit. He can take on the front lines a lot better than Eliwood can because of his bulk. He has like good weapon ranks. His unique weapon, the Wolf Bale, is effective against cavalry and armor knights, and actually has his weapon triangle advantage on them rather than weapon triangle disadvantage like Eliwood will often have. I guess unless they're using swords, but for the most part, cavaliers in this game use lances, and then obviously armor knights only ever really use lances until they promote. So you can definitely get a lot of mileage out of that, especially in the coming chapters. Chapter 14 especially, has a shitload of cavaliers that you're going to want to kill with the Wolf Bale. And just in general, he's got good combat, so he's definitely worth using. It is a shame that he can't promote until later, but again, not the end of the world when the things he gets out of that are so mediocre. Overall, Hector is by far and away the best of the three lords, because he's the only one that's like pretty solid, even if he's not like the best unit in the game or anything. but he's quite handy. Definitely, put time and effort into using him. So you go through you go through the halls of this castle. You get the red gem, if you can. You kill some guys, take out some archers and armor knights and things like that. And then at the end, you fight an armor knight by the name of Wire, and Hector, makes a point of you guys are too good. You're too skilled. You're definitely not. He already suspects Marquess Laus of doing something for some reason. That might have come up in his conversation with Uther, I don't remember. Or Hector's just a very suspicious guy in general, so, it is kind of in character that he would already be suspicious of Laus. But he says, you're not Marquess Laus's guys. You're too trained, you're too professional. And, he's right. These guys are not from Marquess Laus. I mean, I'll just come out and say now that they are a part of an organization called the Black Fang, which we have encountered before. In Lin Mode, they were the ones chasing Ninian and Nils. And we fought them for a couple chapters. They're a professional gang of assassins that we will learn more about in the story later on. However, if you're already familiar with them, as I'm assuming most of the people listening to this podcast are, this begs the very obvious question of why they would want to attack Hector at this point. It seems very random, there's basically no reason for them to do this, and what it reads as is very obvious. They needed a conflict for the first chapter of Hector mode. They wanted to give Hector a unique first chapter, and they couldn't think of who else to use if not the Black Fang, and that's cool and all. I can understand that, but it just doesn't make any fucking sense. The motivation and competency of the Black Fang is so all over the place that I'm gonna try to not call it out too much, just because I would be repeating myself in basically every chapter from here until the end of the game, more or less, or especially the mid game. But for big obvious stuff like this, I really can't. I need to mention something, because it doesn't make any sense that they're here. No sense whatsoever. After Hector takes out these guys, his journey was delayed a little bit, but he's still good to go. He wants to go help Eliwood. This time, Matthew successfully talks him into letting him join, and we get a POV shift over to Uther, Hector's brother, who very much knew that this was coming. He absolutely predicted that this would happen, and he's fine with it. So, and in fact, he sends off. He sends Oswin. Oswin is I guess Uther's retainer. Uther sends Oswin to accompany Hector to make his journey a little bit safer. So Uther is very much on the same page about okay, yeah, I know you're going. I know why you're going, and I'm gonna help you as best as I can without without jeopardizing the safety of Ostia and the rest of my people. And that's the end of the chapter. From this point onward, Eliwood and Hector will be together in basically every chapter. So look forward to that. I love their interactions. And yeah, let's just go ahead and let's go right into chapter 12, which is called Birds of a Feather. So Eliwood is on his way to Laus to try to figure out what the hell is going on, see if he can get any more information on his father. And on the way to Laus is a place called Santaruz. It is, a territory that lies between Faerie and Laus, and I guess they decided to just stop in there, see if Helman, who's the Marquess there, if he can give them any information, since he would have had to pass through, his dad would have had to pass through anyway, so it makes sense to check in there and see if anything, if Santaruz knows anything, or Helman knows anything. We see a scene with Helman talking to a mysterious figure who we don't know. We find out eventually, I don't know exactly when, but we find out eventually that his name is Ephidel, so I'm going to be referring to him as Ephidel, but we're not supposed to know that yet, so shush, don't tell anybody. Ephidel is talking to Helman, and they seem to have some kind of arrangement going on. Eliwood has requested to meet with Helman, and Helman doesn't really know what to say. He likes Eliwood, he likes Elbert, so he knows something clearly, but he doesn't want to tell Eliwood the truth. So he says, I can't lie to Eliwood either. And so Ephidel suggests, which Helman goes along with for some reason, but whatever. He suggests that he send some guys to scare off Eliwood, to stop Eliwood from investigating, which doesn't make any sense, but it's fine. You're going to be hearing me say that a lot, probably. So yeah, that's what Hellman decides to do. He tells Eliwood to go and send some guys to scare off Eliwood, or scare off Eliwood rather. Yeah, and that's basically how the chapter starts. They get approached by these guys, and they're not just trying to scare Eliwood off or give him a little scratch. They're trying to kill Eliwood. So clearly, Eliwood did not, was not being entirely honest with Hellman when he said he was going to do this. So yeah, that's the conflict of this chapter. You have to beat these guys. And then yeah, so that's the goal of this, is to just clear. I think it's a route chapter. You just got to get rid of all the enemies. Hector shows up a few turns in. The only real difference between Eliwood and Hector mode is that Hector is there right from the start in Hector mode, whereas in Eliwood mode it takes him like 1 or 2 turns to show up. And then also, for whatever reason, in Eliwood mode, it's only Hector and Oswin that are playable in this map. But in Hector mode, you also get Matthew and Sarah, who I don't remember. I think we see Sarah come along in like a cutscene or whatever. I don't remember exactly why she's there, but not that I'm complaining. I love Sarah. So yeah, that's the gist of this map. It's not particularly interesting. I don't even really have much else to say. Obviously I haven't talked about Oswin yet. So Oswin is a character who a lot of people really like for the gameplay, and I honestly really agree. So Fire Emblem has this really interesting relationship with unit balance that I'm sure I've talked about before. I'm sure I'll talk about many times in the future. But it has a hard time like finding a way to balance its units and make them like all reasonably fun and engaging to use without being overpowered. And honestly, I don't think that's strictly a problem. Fire Emblem difficulty is very like self-modulated, which I think is nice. You can make the game easier or harder depending on which characters you want to use. So it's very like, if you want to play efficiently and use all the best characters and optimize them as much as you want to, that's fine. But if you are okay with playing a little suboptimally, using characters that you like, or using characters that for like gimmick runs or whatever, you can do that as well, and it's very flexible in that way that I really like. But that's still, that doesn't change the fact that the difficulty is very imbalanced. I think Oswin is honestly one of the most well balanced gameplay units in the entire series, because he is in a unique situation where he is in a very bad class. Armor Knight is a very bad class in basically every game. There are only a handful of games where I think the Armor Knight's are actually worth using, and this is certainly not one of them. Like as a rule, it's the only other one we get I think is Wallace, right? But yeah, but like in general in the GBA games, the generals and Armor Knights are not really worth using. Oswin, though, kind of makes up for that by the fact that he is really strong. He has really, really good defense, really good, pretty good strength, HP, all that stuff. He's slow, and he's weak against magic. But even then, like, his res is not that bad, or maybe it's his HP. But like he can deal with magic enemies like kind of well. And he's enemies in this game are so bad that he's not going to get doubled consistently most of the time, at least early on. So he's a really good unit. I like using him a lot. And he does fall off towards when your own characters start to get better. And then, of course, he promotes to general, while other characters are going to promote to, like, either better infantry classes, or, some of your characters will promote to, like, paladins or falcon knights or whatever. And he'll start to fall behind in that capacity. But until then, for the first chunk of the game, Oswin is quite a good unit, and a lot of people like using him. I think, limiting yourself to archetypes is a bit silly. Like I think this game and a lot of games in the series really benefit from this idea of like the Jagan archetype does not have to fit any particular mold. Like calling Oswin a Jagan would be silly. But he does sort of fit that same design concept of like, we want a character who's not like, who is going to be useful, but there maybe is some limiting factor in using him. At least on paper. Like Marcus doesn't have that, but on paper he does, because his growth rates aren't that good. But Oswin actually does, which I think makes him a more interesting version of that like character concept. But yeah, I really like Oswin. I'm planning on using him on one of my teams. I don't remember which one it is. I did take a really, really long gap between recording the past couple of chapters and recording this one. I'm sure you know, like, whenever this episode goes out, it'll have been, like, I think 2 months since the last one went out. Maybe a little bit longer. So yeah, it's sorry about that. Just a little bit of a time snag there. But just I might have forgotten things that I said earlier in this episode is my point. So try not to hold it against me too much. Yeah, that's pretty much it. After actually, that's it really. I'm pretty sure that's like Eliwood and Hector have a chat. Where they talk about, like, oh, what are you doing here? Oh, I came to help you, yada yada. It's pretty good. I like Eliwood and Hector's dynamic a lot. But that's really all there is to it. There's not much else to say. Next up is chapter 13, which is called In Search of Truth. At the beginning of this chapter, I thought it was the end of last chapter, but it's the beginning of this chapter, Hellman decides that he is not going to go through this anymore. He feels too bad. He's like, I'm not going to lie to Eliwood. I'm not going to try to hurt Eliwood. Like, when he gets here, I'm going to tell him everything. He tells this to Effidel, for some reason, and then Effidel, of course, just kills him immediately. So, yeah, not really Hellman's brightest moment there, but that it is what it is. I guess he tried to do the right thing right at the end there, and it did not pay off well for him. Actually, starting this chapter, this is I really didn't even talk about the last chapter at all, because it wasn't that good. But this chapter is honestly pretty interesting. There's a couple different ways you can go, and I think particularly on Hector hard mode, this is honestly like a pretty tricky chapter. I actually lost several characters here. I think Dorcas. Was it Dorcas? I think Dorcas died. And then I lost a couple characters. I don't remember. I don't remember all of them that are gone. No one that I'm planning on using long term. But for the beginning stages of this game, it might make the next couple of chapters kind of hard, but that's fine. But yeah, so you can split your army here. You can have some guys go left. There is a guidance chapter associated with this chapter. In order to unlock it, you just have to have somebody visit the house on the top left corner of the map, or the village on the top left corner of the map. If you do that, then you'll unlock the guidance chapter. It's also like a very skippable guidance chapter. You don't really have to do it if you don't want to. It gives you some money, which is nice, and then obviously, it lets you recruit Merlinus a little bit earlier, which we'll get into. But Merlinus will show up no matter what after a couple more chapters, so it's not like the end of the world if you miss this. Although, it's pretty hard to miss, to be fair. You're probably going to visit the house anyway. In fact, when you visit the house, I don't know actually why he says this, because if you see this dialogue, I guess it's not really meant to be a hint or anything, I guess, but the dialogue in the house is, you talk to this blue-haired guy. I mean, if you've played FE6 for some reason, if you're in the main demographic of people who listen to this podcast, then you probably started with 7 and then played 6. But if, for whatever reason you played 6 first, then you'll probably recognize this guy as Merlinus, and like be like, oh, it's Merlinus, it's my boy. Yeah, he says like, oh, I gotta get to Kaelin or something like that. So yeah. Whenever we get to Kaelin in the main story, which is like chapter, I want to say like 16 or 17. I think it's 17 that he joins you if you don't do the Gaiden. So you get him like a few chapters early if you do the Gaiden. There's also a house here. I think it's actually one of the houses that doesn't give you anything, which I've been trying to make sure that I go to, because most of them are just like tutorial stuff, but some of them do have legitimately useful information. Like in this one, there's a house that warns you about killing edge. There's a character, a recruitable character, which we'll talk about in a minute, who is on this map, and he has a killing edge, so you got to be really careful about him, and that's nice. If you don't notice the killing edge, then it could definitely screw you up. Not many characters can live a round of combat with Guy, at least not reliably, and certainly not on Hector hard mode. So definitely keeping an eye out for that killing edge is good, and I'm glad that this house warns you about it. Yeah, I mean, it's really like the only interesting part of this map is that the house in the middle can be a little bit tricky to get to, because it's not that hard. Like, especially if you're using Marcus, it's fine. But he, if you overextend, it can be because you do get swamped by a lot of enemies in this area. Especially once the reinforcements start showing up, it can be a lot. But once you get the house, then you can retreat and play it a little bit more slowly. There's no like no reason to there's no anti-turtling incentive. Basically, once you get that first house, or get both the houses, I guess, the brigands aren't going to have anywhere to go, so you don't have to worry about them going to get a house on the other end of the map. So, yeah, I mean, it's easing you into it a little bit. I think this would be. It's hard to say that this is like bad, right? Because I understand that this is like kind of the start of the game, but at the same time, it's called chapter 13 because we had so many chapters beforehand. If like Lin mode did not exist and I hadn't already been playing Fire Emblem for 10 chapters, then I'd be a little bit more amicable to this. Like if this was chapter 3 of any other game, I think it would be fine, but because it is technically chapter 13, I did play 12 chapters before doing this one. It feels, and same for the chapters right before that, like all the chapters this episode really, and then some of the ones that come after. It's not really until we hit Kalen that I start to like really, like the maps start to come into their own, I think. But yeah, once you get that middle house, which by the way, the middle house has a character in it, who is technically, I guess she's a recruitable character. She's not a playable one. She is an NPC that joins you later on. Her name is Hannah, and that's, I mean, for now that's all I'll say about her because she doesn't actually join until I think it might be chapter 14 that she joins. Regardless. We'll talk a little bit more about her when she actually like properly joins. She doesn't even say her name here, I don't think. What she does do is she gives you a mine. And if you know anything about mines, you probably know what I'm about to talk about. There is an infamous glitch in the GBA games where if you plant a mine and then like someone walks on it and then you like reset at the right time, you can control the enemies, which can be fun. You can have them trade their weapons around. Makes the chapter a little bit easier. Yeah, I've never actually done them. Well, I think I've done it, but I've never, like, just to try it out, I've never actually used it to, like, help myself clear a map before. But it's used, obviously it's used in, like, speedruns and stuff, which is pretty neat. And then, it can be, if you're, like, really struggling on a map, some of the later Hector hard mode maps are pretty fucking hard. So I wouldn't blame anyone for using the mind glitch to help them get through, like, victory or death or, Battle Before Dawn, or what's another one? Cog of Destiny. Yeah, it's the big one. So yeah, definitely keep that in mind if you're not familiar with the mind glitch. Definitely look it up. It's pretty entertaining, if nothing else. Last thing I want to talk about for this map. There is a recruitable character. His name is I've heard it pronounced Yi. I've also heard it pronounced Guy. I'm gonna pronounce it Guy. I think it's. Some people think it's pronounced Gi because it's like, it's a Japanese game. Maybe it is pronounced Gi based on like the Romanji or whatever. I'm just gonna call him Guy because that's how it's spelled. But yeah, so Guy is a recruitable character. You recruit him by talking to him with Matthew. I don't actually remember. I don't remember how you're supposed to know this. I think it comes up in like one of the houses or something. You know what it was? They do a cutaway to him at the beginning of the map where he's like, man, this reminds me of that time that I almost died in Sakei and this guy named Matthew helped save my life. It's a little bit ham-fisted, I'll admit it, but you can have Matthew talk to him and he will recruit Guy. Guy is a Myrmidon. Guy is also the first character I think that we're seeing to benefit from hard mode bonuses. Hard mode bonuses, if you remember, were in FE6, and they sometimes, although they were very, inconsistently applied, they boosted the stats of some recruitable enemy characters. So, like, Milady is, like, one of the most infamous examples. Rutger, probably also, Percival, sometimes, only in Chapter 15. Basically, the whole thing with hard mode bonuses in that game, though, is that they were only applied to certain units, and the rule seemed to be very, like, arbitrary. It was, like, basically only if they joined part way through a map, if they were, like, considered reinforcements to the map, but if they were visible in battle preps, then they did not get the hard mode bonuses, which was janky and it was weird, and they fixed it in this one, basically, is a short version. Guy has hard mode bonuses. There are I don't know if every recruitable enemy has hard mode bonuses. I know Raven gets them later. There aren't a whole lot of recruitable enemies in this game. I don't know that Jafar gets them because Jafar isn't an enemy like right before he joins you. Um, so I would assume probably not. I don't know if Jafar ever actually shows up on an enemy in any map though. So yeah, um, I don't remember. But it's applied a lot more consistently in this game. Basically, several of the enemies have them. Recruitable enemy units have them. Guy really benefits from these hard mode bonuses. He actually like does damage. I mean, the main thing about Guy is that he's a Myrmidon, right? Like he is frail. He doesn't do a lot of damage. He really needs his killing edge. I ended up going through the killing edge very extensively in the next chapter when I played through on Hector hard mode. I burned through like half the killing edge uses already. Because otherwise like Guy just cannot consistently one round things even with the killing edge. Unless he crits, he doesn't always one round, which can be a little frustrating. And yeah, he doesn't have the damage output. Supports in this game are a little bit more feasible to get. They still take forever. And certainly like if you're trying to do any amount of efficiency, or like trying to beat the chapters quickly, then, obviously you're not going to grind out supports, but for what it's worth, Guy does have I believe he has a fire affinity. Let me just double check that real quick. Yes, he does have a fire affinity, so no matter who you support him with, he will benefit from offensive bonuses. It doesn't look like he has any other affinity, any support partners with affinities that boost strength or attack. So it is what it is. No, wind boot. Okay, yeah, he has a really fast building support with Matthew. And Matthew boosts his offense as well. So if you want to support him with Matthew, that can be a nice way to patch his offenses. But obviously, again, like grinding supports is not something that everybody wants to do, and it might not. It's probably not worth it to you unless you really want to use Guy to take that action. He's fast. But the thing about speed in this game is that, after a certain point, it's very overkill. Most enemies in this game are very slow, and you do not need to consistently double. You're going to consistently double them, even if you don't have super high speed like Guy does. So overall, Guy is not a particularly good unit. I do like him. I do think he's a lot of fun to use. I'm not planning on using him this playthrough, but I have used him in many playthroughs in the past, and I think he can be solid. I don't think he's a terrible unit or anything. Even on Hector hard mode, maybe especially on Hector hard mode, where he gets the hard mode bonuses. I think he can be fine. But he's just not anything special and requires some investment and some dedication to make it work. So it might not be worth it for you. Okay. After you beat the boss of this chapter, Eliwood approaches. There's some stuff in the Hector mode version I didn't talk about. So, so one thing you'll notice, especially in last chapter and this chapter, and I think pretty consistently throughout the game, there are in Hector mode, for whatever reason, I don't know why, but in Hector mode specifically, there are way more Pegasus Knights in the early game chapters. And Pegasus Knights can be kind of annoying, but they're not that bad. They're honestly really slow because their con is so bad. They get weighed down by the lances that they're wielding. So you don't really have to worry about them doubling you for the most part. In general, they're pretty easy to take down. Anybody with a solid attack stat, Hector with his axes, or even Darkus or Bartray can handle them pretty well. Oswin makes very short work of them. I don't think they're even worth Marcus's time. Pretty much anybody can deal with them. So if you recall, I am playing on a ×3 effectiveness patch, which means in the vanilla game, in the United States North American release, effective weaponry, so bows on Pegasus Knights, for example, only did ×2 damage. It only did ×2 might. But I'm playing with a patch that increases that back up to ×3, which is what it was in the original Japanese release. And Rebecca cannot consistently one-shot the Pegasus Knights with ×3 effective bows, which I think is just really, really sad. I feel she's so bad. Rebecca is terrible in this game. It's really sad. Just thought I'd throw that out there. Yeah, I mean that's pretty much it. I do have a note here. It occurred to me as I was playing this. I think I got a crit or something. It occurred to me like, have I talked about the crit animations? I've talked about the Game Boy animations a little bit. I think. A lot of people consider the Game Boy Advance games to have the best animations in the series, which I think is actually very reasonable. I don't know if I necessarily agree. I think that Shadows of Valentia is probably up there for me, as well as I think Radiant, like Path of Radiance and especially Radiant Dawn, have some really good animations as well. But there's something so satisfying about the Game Boy Advance animations. They're so simple. They're very stylish and clean. And yeah, they're just awesome. And I mean, like the crit animations are consistently cited as some of the best, probably the best in the entire series. Like every class has such a cool crit animation, especially the promoted ones. To be fair, pretty much every like mounted class suffers from basically having the same crit animation where they'll just spin their weapon. Which is still pretty cool, admittedly. But the foot units are where it's at. You got like the Sword Master, with the shadow clones. You got like heroes tossing their shields up in the air and slamming down. You got the nomad troopers that do like the enormous jump in the air. Like there's so many cool crit animations in these games, and I could not remember for the life of me if I've talked about them, and even if I have, I think it's fine to like bring attention to this multiple times because I think it is consistently one of the best, most exciting things about revisiting the GBA games is just seeing all these cool animations. So I figured I'd just bring it up, even if I mentioned it before. I feel like it was worth talking about again. I'll probably talk about it again before we're through with FE8. Okay, after this chapter, Eliwood goes to the castle and sees Hellman dead on the floor. Hellman is able to get out a few words, basically apologizes, and the important thing, the main thing that happens here is that he says, what is it? Darren, the Marquess of Laos, knows all, is what he says, which I don't know why this was necessary because we were already headed to Laos, but I guess it's just a way for them to like make sure Eliwood is like, okay, there's like something definitely fishy going on here. So I can see why they would do that. But then Hellman dies, which is unfortunate. He was a little bit of a shithole, I guess, but he was probably he tried to do the right thing at the end, which is nice. Okay. Last but not least, actually last but probably least, if I'm being honest, we're going to talk about Chapter 13X, which is The Peddler Merlinus. So there's a little bit of a conversation here at the start where Eliwood and Hector start talking about Lynn, which is nice. They're basically like, I really like when Eliwood and Hector are just able to act as friends, and this is a good example of that here, where he basically calls Lynn beautiful, and Hector kind of like teases him for it. Anyway, while they're camping out for the night or whatever, they come across Merlinus, who's a merchant, being accosted by some bandits, and they step in to try to help him. So this is maybe the worst. The worst concept for a map. It is a Fog of War defend chapter, which isn't like why would they do this? Combining two of the word. I like defend maps, but defend maps are not, especially in this game. Defend maps are not that good. I think this one is actually pretty good, admittedly, because is actually kind of tricky. I have written in my notes for the Hector version because I'm playing Hector hard mode. The only thing I have in my notes for the Hector mode version is, God, this map is hard. Which I think just, it's a tricky map in Hector hard mode. In Eliwood normal mode and Eliwood hard mode and Hector normal mode, it's all super piss easy. It's not worth talking about, but Hector hard mode is honestly really, really tricky for this map, because you don't know where the enemies are, right? Like they're coming in from left and right. There's, archers that can shoot Merlinus if you're not careful. You got nomads, which are very fast and can double. Myrmidons that can double. I ended up losing, I think Rebecca here. Maybe one more even. Like I lost a couple of good units. Well, a couple of units here, but it is what it is. This is a. I remember liking it. You know what? I can tell you the exact thought process. So I started it. I did the Eliwood mode version, whatever. Then I did the Hector mode version, and it was tricky, and I ended up having to redo it a few times. And as I was like doing it, I was like, this is a Fog of War map. I don't usually like these, but I'm having a good time with this. Like it feels like I'm actually being challenged. It feels like I'm actually being pushed. And then I started to get a little frustrated because I kept having to redo it, and a lot of them were for like reasons that I feel like were entirely my fault. It sucks when an enemy comes out of the fog that you didn't see coming. You overextended because you didn't know what there was. A Fog of War inherently frustrates me because it limits your information, and strategies that are punished based on information that you didn't have, that's always frustrating. So, I was getting ready to sing this chapter's praises at first, and then I got my ass beat by it a couple too many times, and I was like, okay, maybe it's not that good. It's fine. I think if you're better at Fire Emblem than I am, then I think this is a pretty good map. Although if you're too much better at Fire Emblem than I am, then you're going to be in the position that most people are in most defend maps in this game, where you just beat all the enemies, and then you have to press end turn 6 times to end the map or whatever. It's only a 7-turn defend map, so there's some gold here. That's always that's always fun, because I usually send Marcus to go get that just so he can do it quickly. But you also have to be careful, because Marcus is like your best bet against most of these guys here. So keeping Marcus in the starting area can be useful, or like near the starting area. So it's a little bit of a pros versus con thing there. This is only my second time playing Hector hard mode, so I'm not quite used to actually being like challenged in this game. I think that's part of it. My mentality is still very much like, oh, this game is easy, and like Hector hard mode isn't that hard. I still maintain, I sincerely do mean this, that I think FE6 normal mode is about as hard as Hector hard mode. Like, it's not that hard, but it is like, I think it has more to do with like the map design in FE6, but doesn't really matter. My point is that Hector hard mode is not that tricky, but I'm not used to it, so it is kind of giving me a little bit of a tough time, but not in a bad way. I'm enjoying my time with it so far. We'll see if that continues into Hector, like the late game Hector hard mode maps are like crazy. Let me see. I have a. Let me see if I can find my draft that I did recently. No, wasn't that recently. It was like a couple years ago now. FE7 draft. FE7 draft. Is this it? This might be it. Yeah. Victory or death. Player 15 plus 1 being, I think that's Renault. And then enemy, 39 initial enemies with 268 reinforcements. Oh, I don't like Fire Emblem, the Blazing Blade. That's really all there is to say about this map. I think it's fine. I obviously I haven't really been going in a lot of depth about any of these maps. I think in general, you can say. Let me finish talking about this one first, actually. So the Hector mode version does have a couple extra lines for Hector, which I think are funny. Just him being a jackass, and Eliwood needing to be like, Hector, shut the fuck up, which I think is endearing. But that's all there is to it. I mean, Merlinus like swears his fealty to House. I guess to both of them, not specifically one or the other. We do know eventually he ends up going with Eliwood, and staying there permanently as a long-term member of his court. So it's cool to see a little origin story on that. I do think that there's a lot to be said about, does everything need an origin story? Did we need to know how Merlinus met Eliwood? Probably not, but it's still pretty fun. I'm glad that this exists, because it's not like, they don't spend a lot of time on it. And I guess I'll talk about this here a little bit, because especially since the question of the episode is about this. Merlinus works a little bit differently than he did in FE6. Instead of needing a deployment slot, there's a simple like yes or no, do you want to deploy Merlinus? There's no real downside to deploying Merlinus either, which I think is I do think that him costing a deployment slot was interesting, and I don't necessarily think that they should have brought that back, but I do think that there should have been some not penalty, but like there was some risk, because I don't know why you wouldn't just automatically deploy him in every chapter. It doesn't really make sense to me, especially since unlike in FE6, if he is not deployed, you cannot send items to the convoy. Like if you pick up an item and you're full, you gotta toss one instead of sending it back to Merlinus if Merlinus is not on the map. So yeah, you pretty much just want to deploy Merlinus every time. If Merlinus is deployed and he survives, which is usually pretty easy, in some maps it is kind of tricky to keep Merlinus alive. I think some especially some of the ones coming up can be pretty hard. But like towards the mid game, there's like barely any concern about that. I'm pretty sure. Well, and then after you do that 20 times, once he gets to level 20, he will promote, and you will still have a binary yes or no option to deploy him, but now he's mobile. Whereas earlier, in FE6, he's a cart, like a mobile cart that you can move around. In the beginning of this game, he is just a tent that stays in one fixed position. But once you promote him, he can move around the map freely. I'm pretty sure the earliest that you can do that is like around Battle Before Dawn, or like maybe a little bit before. So it's pretty late in the game, and I don't it's not that useful at that point. But it's still worth considering, and it's not no harm in it certainly. I think I like the idea of Merlinus in this game. I think that having to spend a whole deployment slot on him was maybe a little bit too punishing, so I can understand why they would want to change that. But again, it doesn't really feel like they thought about how deploying him would feel, and like if you're gonna make him a part of the gameplay experience in this way, I feel like it should have maybe been thought through a little bit more. I think I do like the system a bit more than FE6, but and then it's telling that I think after this, for the most part, I think there's a couple games that do some stuff with it later, but for the most part, after this, they really did just say fuck it, and the Lord is going to be the convoy, simple as that. So Merlinus agrees to accompany you for the rest of the game. Again, if you do not recruit him here, you will still be able to get him. He will show up in, I believe, chapter 17 Hector mode, chapter 16 Eliwood. The castle, the Kalen Castle level, I believe it is. So, but it's definitely worth getting him a little bit early, so you don't have to toss stuff out of your inventory if you fill up. Yeah, that's all there is to it about this map, really. It's fine. I think it's... I don't know if it's the worst map. Like the other ones are so boring is the thing, right? Like this is a little bit frustrating, but I think I still like it better than just the maps before it, just because those ones are so boring. I think in general, I haven't had a lot to say about these maps. I think it's because, it feels like the beginning of a Fire Emblem game. I didn't have a lot to say about the early FE6 maps. I'm not going to have a lot to say about the early FE8 maps. It's because like this feels like the first few chapters of a Fire Emblem game, except it's not. Like as much as you can argue, like yes, Lin mode is skippable in on second playthroughs, or if you're playing with you have a copy of Binding Blade that you can connect to your Game Boy or whatever, you can skip it in your first playthrough as well if you're playing in Japan. But those levels are still in the game, and most people are still going to go through them, and the fact that there's not, the fact that doesn't seem to be accounted for here at all is really weird. Like if you're gonna make it so that you can skip them, but only if you can prove that you know what you're doing by having another Fire Emblem game, then I don't know why you don't just make the maps harder, right? Because anybody who is skipping to these maps is going to be experienced anyway. You've already shown. You've already put the burden of proof on them to show that they are they have played another Fire Emblem game before, so you can maybe trust them to get to the difficult stuff a little bit quicker. But no, I guess not. So it is what it is. And then the story up to this point is like I've been making some snide remarks here and there, but the story just makes absolutely no sense at this point. Like, why is anybody acting the way they are? Why is the Black Fang going after Hector for no reason when he hasn't even joined up with Eliwood yet? like what. I don't get it. I mean, like there are things to like about the story. I think the overarching plot is like bad. But I think individual character moments and motivations are interesting. I think Nurgle is an overrated villain, but I do think he's an interesting one. I don't have a lot of positive things to say about the story, basically. So I might make snide remarks, and then I'll probably do what I just did right now, which is at the end of every episode, I'll probably talk a little bit about my overall thoughts on the story. And it's also, eventually we're going to start to get into, like, every chapter is going to, like, there's going to be something meaningful to talk about in the story. We're just not there yet. So, it's been a while since we really, the beginning of FE6 was, like, a full year ago now. So it's been a while since I've had to talk about, like, the early game of a Fire Emblem game. So, yeah, thanks for bearing with me, and getting through some of these less interesting maps. Yeah, that's all that I have to say about these chapters. So let's go ahead and get into the news for this episode. So I did briefly talk about this. I'm recording this in post because I forgot to kind of go into my explicit thoughts on the map gauntlet for this episode. I did briefly talk about how I thought the 13X is probably my favorite chapter out of these, which I'm pretty sure I still stand by. It's hard because I don't really like any of these maps, but it's also hard because I don't really like Chapter 3 that much either. Like, there's not that many. We're finally, from what I remember, next episode, we're finally going to start to get into the maps that are good and that I like. So I'm really excited for next episode. But for right now, it's really just, 13, it's definitely not 11, either 11. It's definitely, maybe it is chapter 11 Hector, but no, I don't think so. I think it's got to be 13X. I think that's the only possible option that I have. And then compared to chapter 3, I guess it's better. I mean, it's not good though. So it's really not worth laboring over this much because I'm pretty sure next episode is just going to get ousted by one of the chapters we're playing next episode anyway. We got like 4 or 5 bangers back to back. I'm not a big fan of all of them, but several of them I think are really good. And then the episode after is also going to be really good. So I'm really excited for that. We're getting into some really good chapters soon. But for right now, take it with a grain of salt. I guess probably gun to my head, 13X is my favorite chapter in the game so far. Unsure though. Still a lot of room for improvement. It's been a couple months. I'm recording this on. It actually just turned over to midnight. It isn't, so I guess now technically it is February 26th, and then I think the last episode went out at like the end of December. So it's been a couple months. I'm looking at yeah. I mean we're going back a fair bit. FE. Okay, no. So I never. Oh, I think I talked about this already. I never did a FE3 2023 episode. I kind of want to. I mean, it's too late now, I guess, but I want to at least watch FE3 at some point 2023. I didn't get a chance to do that, but Choose Your Legends happened. I don't care. It's like female. I don't remember who won Choose Your Legends. It was like. Oh, I see. Okay, they're right here. It's female Robin, Bernadetta for women. Bernadetta in first place. And then for guys, it was Felix, and then Alphonse, which is the heroes, one of the original heroes OCs. Right from the beginning, he's like the main lord of Fire Emblem Heroes. So interesting. I don't play heroes, but if one of your favorites won, good for you. I like Felix, so I guess I'm right there with you. There's some Fire Emblem Engage merchandise, toy emblem rings, acrylic stands. That's it really. And a female Aleer figure, if you're interested in that. That's all there is for news. As you might expect, I've been playing a lot and watching a lot. I came off the tail of watching Mobile Suit Gundam for the first time. I'm starting to. If you didn't listen to my my episode on the best games I played last year, then you might not know this, but I played a game called Super Robot Wars, Super Robot Wars 30 last year, and I liked it quite a bit, and it's gotten me interested in watching some mech anime. So I just started. I finished the original Mobile Suit Gundam. I'm going to be going into Zeta Gundam, and then into Double Zeta and Char's Counterattack. From there, I'm not really sure what I want to do. I kind of want to go in release order, but I also have friends telling me to go watch Unicorn because Unicorn is like right after that chronologically, but it came out so many years later. I kind of just want to like watch the ones that come after that in like release order. I don't know. I'll decide. But for those, at least Zeta Gundam, Double Zeta, and then Char's Counterattack for sure. And then I watched a couple of I watched I Want to Eat Your Pancreas, which was fine. I thought it was pretty good, but nothing like super great. But the games I played is where it's at. So let's talk about some of those games. The games that I've played so far this year. I can bring up my 2024 list, which is available on Backlogged, backlog.com/u/I'm Melee Kirby. You can check out my list of games and my running list of games I played this year, ordered from favorite to least favorite so far. Technically, Lethal Company is on there. I've only played a few rounds. I want to play more. It seems pretty fun, but like not, I don't know. I don't know if I'm gonna get a chance to play more before the sort of fad dies down. So I don't know if I'm gonna actually play more, but it was fine. It was all right. I played Kingdom Hearts, the original Kingdom Hearts, for the first time, which I plan to talk about more at some point. I played the original Hitman reboot. So Hitman 2016, I think it's 2016. Yeah, 2016. I finished my first Final Fantasy game, Final Fantasy VI. I'd never beaten a Final Fantasy game before, and 6, I'd come close to, not close, I don't think I was even remotely close, but I'd played a good amount of 6 before, and I wanted to see if I could get through it, and I did. I liked it quite a bit. I played Psychonauts, which was a fun little 3D platformer with some really endearing humor and characters. Really great set of voice actors. Really good game. Highly recommend. Short and cheap. And there's a sequel that came out recently, so I have no idea if the sequel's any good, but definitely worth checking out. But I'm spending all this time talking. I'm dancing around the clear front runner for this year for me. It was Persona 3 Reload. I absolutely fucking loved Persona 3 Reload. I beat the whole thing in like 3 weeks, which is not that fast compared to some people, but like that's fast for me, especially for a game like that's as long as this. I love Persona. I think Persona 4 Golden is in my top 5 favorite games of all time. Persona 5 Royal I don't love, but it's pretty good. I like it quite a bit, especially some of the content that is new in Royal I think is really good. And then Persona 3 Reload I think is probably like smack dab in the middle. I definitely liked 4 Golden more, but 3 Reload definitely has it has a better story for sure, and then just like a couple of things here and there I think are better and more interesting. But yeah, I'll definitely talk more about that. It's in more in depth. I might even do like some kind of like bonus episode about specifically Persona, because I think there's a lot to chew on there. I might want to get a guest on there though, because there's definitely some stuff in there that I'm going to want to talk about that I don't think I'm necessarily equipped to handle. Specifically related to like LGBTQ concerns, because these games are very conservative in that regard, especially the older ones. 3 Reload is like mostly fine about it. They took out the transphobia shit from the scene where they're going around hitting on women at the beach. But yeah, anyway, that's something I'm considering, but I definitely don't have any like immediate plans for that. Persona 3 Reload is a great game. If you don't already own it, maybe go out and buy it and play it. It's gonna be tough to pirate. I was gonna pirate it, but I couldn't. So I caved and just bought it because I'm a fraud and a hypocrite. But just do as I say, not as I do. Yeah, great game. Really had a lot of fun with it. Okay, so next episode we are going to be doing. Let me take a look actually. Yes, okay, so we're going to be doing 14, 15, 16, and 17. Actually, did I do... this right. I feel like there was something that I was going to change here. 14, 15, 16, and 17. Did I want to start the episode after with 17X? Or did I want to end the next episode with 17X? I'm trying to decide what's better. I think it makes more sense to... Okay, so yeah, here's what I'll do. I'm going to do... Next episode, I'm going to do 14, 15, 16, 17, and 17X. The episode after that, and I'm getting ahead of myself here, but the episode after that, I'm going to end on 20, which I think makes more sense. So it'll be 18, 19, 19X, 19XX, and then 20. And then the episode after that will start on 21 and then do 22, 23, and 23X. I think that makes the most sense. Okay. So yeah, short answer. Yeah, I mean, I already told you next episode 14. So that'll start with the Louse stuff and then go right up until the end of Kalen. Until like the beginning of the Dread Isle. So that'll be cool. I'm excited to get to that stuff. I think honestly, some of the chapters we're going to be talking about next episode, I remember being quite fond of. So we will see how that plays out. But anyway, I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I will see you all next time. Bye bye.